Hi, my name is Benica Dale. I've chosen an alternating treatments design for my project to compare the effectiveness of verbal and positional prompting to increase the appropriate disposal of laundry. My rationale for choosing this specific design was based off of a couple of journal articles. For example, McKay in 2014 did a research that compared the methods of most to least prompting and least to most prompting and what was most effective. The overall conclusion of this specific study really was that the criteria for selecting a prompt level is really personalized to an individual and is so incredibly crucial for the effectiveness of meeting that skill acquisition, no matter the intervention or goal that you choose. But it is incredibly important to choose the appropriate prompt method, prompt level for an individual according to their needs and their personal learning ways. And I also chose this specific study to do because I also remembered a journal article I read as well from Stans et al. 2000 back in 2015, where they go over like young adult household and like domestic sustainabilities and just the overall importance of these skill life acquisition that I specifically am targeting as well, which is exactly why I chose the target behavior of disposal of laundry. And to specifically define informally my target behavior, it's essentially use articles of clothing being appropriately placed in a the correct location. The correct location is defined as a laundry hamper. So dirty laundry being placed in the laundry hamper. That is the target behavior. And according to the article, I really based my rationale off of as well was there is a clear connection between having a organized, clean lifestyle, which includes getting chores done, which is part of a lot of developmental stages from childhood into adulthood, even, where we see that by having essentially an organized, clean life and these basic skill acquisition, it mirrors and reflects into our school life, our work life as well. And we do see that correlation. And so that's why it can be such a crucial life skill to understand the effectiveness of keeping up with your laundry, doing your dishes. And so on so many different levels, I really chose to do this to do this study because having that level of organization is an important skill set to have and is a benefit for the participant themselves, as well as in regards to ABA as well. We see and can continue to add to the evidence of utilizing the appropriate prompting level according to the individual. And that's exactly what this study is really the purpose of it. My research question was, does a positional or verbal prompt increase life skills more effectively over the other, with the specific target for today's life skill or in my study is the organization, the appropriate disposal of used articles of clothing. The participant's pseudonym is Roman. They are a 24-year-old adult male. And I want to reiterate target behavior skill, appropriate disposal of used articles of clothing in the correct location. Roman was observed to have a low rate of this specific target behavior. And to reference again some of the previous studies, as I'd mentioned, McKay 2014 in his study, Visual Activity Schedules with Embedded Video Models to Teach Laundry Skills to Adults with Intellectual Disabilities. We see that the study reflects there's important criteria when trying to create teaching instructions and to take into consideration when deciding on an intervention for a specific participant. And that was the overall conclusion. Although the researchers really intended to go in to understand is most to least or least to most a better prompting level, what ended up coming out of it was it's important to understand the prompt method, prompt level, because long-term effects, we see the long-term effects of utilizing the appropriate prompt level according to the personalization of the individual, as well as it can translate into future interventions that maybe want to be implemented for that individual as well. And then once more again, we see there is this correlation, especially in Watson 2017 study. There is a clear effectiveness by cleaning by having the skill sets and acquisitions of cleaning and organizing. You have better effective behaviors and skills in regards to school and work as well. And then just to reiterate again, I may have misquoted. According to McKay's study, the title for that specific article was Comparison of Prompting Hierarchies on the Acquisition of Leisure and Vocational Skills, which is the study that compares the most to least and least to most prompting. And the previous study of Watson was specifically visual activity schedules with embedded video models to teach laundry skills to adults with intellectual disabilities. So once more, these previous studies really go to show the importance of this life skill and the importance as well in regards to the ABA standards of creating interventions to increase a behavior or even decrease a behavior, understanding the prompt level you should be utilizing and the prompt techniques you should be utilizing that are, again, evidence-based and ABA-based. I'm going to go ahead and move forward into more detail about the method itself that I utilized. I selected an alternating treatments design to implement this study. Baseline was taken with no intervention, no interference whatsoever, just pure observation. Observation was done for 5 days straight at the same exact time at 8 a.m. Trials were according to the opportunities, and the opportunities were around 5 opportunities per session, because a trial or an opportunity was considered any instance in article of clothing needed to be removed or placed away. So this does include socks. A pair of socks was considered 2 trials per each sock, a shirt, pants, and a hoodie. So that's why there were around 5 trials per session, with different durations. If the participant was wearing gloves or something that day, that was taken into consideration. But for the most part, there were around 5 trials, and this baseline averaged at around 18%. The data was collected on a graphed paper sheet, and a percent correct measurement was utilized in order to measure and compare all of the data. Now, a correct trial was considered any instance that Roman, the participant, would place their article of clothing in the laundry hamper. And any instance in which Roman did not place the used article of clothing in the laundry hamper, this was considered an incorrect trial, whether it was placed on the floor or anything like that. Now, if there was an instance in which Roman asked another individual to place their article of clothing in the basket, this trial was not graphed and not taken into consideration. Now, moving forward into the intervention phase, the same criteria was utilized to graph and take data even in the intervention phase. The only difference is the intervention of a positional prompt and a verbal prompt. This is where that alternating treatments method really came in. On the first day of the intervention, we utilized a positional prompt. A positional prompt was considered moving the basket in a location in which Roman would be able to see and pass by instantly as a way to prompt him to place the article of clothing in that basket. This was placed in the hallway that Roman would be passing by any instance that he did need to change his article of clothing. Intervention phase as well. There were 8 days that intervention data was taken, and they were all taken at the same exact time as baseline at 8 in the morning. Now, a verbal prompt was any instance in which Roman did place article of clothing on the floor. He was given a verbal prompt with the SD, or the discriminative stimulus, to Roman, pick up that article of clothing and place it in the basket. That was the consistent SD to correct any instance in which the article of clothing was not in the basket. And if Roman placed the article of clothing within 5 minutes after the verbal prompt into the basket, this was marked as a correct trial. And following that, the third day was a positional prompt, fourth day was a verbal prompt, and so far and so forth. And that was the method that was utilized to have the baseline and then as well as the intervention. Now, moving on to the results of the study, we see that the baseline was at around an average of 18%, considering all the days in the sessions that were utilized, that laundry or articles of clothing were appropriately placed in the laundry basket. In the intervention phase, an average of 83.3% of opportunities for the behavior were correct with a positional prompt. And now with a verbal prompt, there is an average of 21% of opportunities that were correct when in which Roman would place the article of clothing in the basket. Now, we see that there is clearly a very drastic difference when comparing from baseline to the two different intervention methods. We see, again, another difference. So comparing from the baseline of 18% to the positional prompt of 83.3%, there is a 65.3% increase of the target behavior. Now, when we are taking into consideration the baseline and comparing the results into the verbal prompt, we see there is a 3% increase of the behavior compared to the baseline when looking at the verbal prompt results. Now, delving into the actual visual of the data so far on the upper right hand, we will see that there is a consistent trend line that's stable at that 18%. And then when looking into the intervention phase, we do see an increasing trend line for positional prompting. And then the verbal prompting trend line is actually decreasing. Now, taking into consideration the method, the results, the importance and rationale, we come to a similar conclusion of my previous referenced article with Watson and McKay, or specifically with the McKay article, in which utilizing the correct prompting method can be incredibly crucial and important to the skill acquisition that an intervention may be targeting. And so it's very clear that positional prompting was the more effective prompting level to utilize, as it has an increasing trend line. And again, it was at a 65.3% compared to the 3% that verbal prompting was at. In fact, one of the biggest things to note and highlight in this specific study was verbal prompting had a decreasing trend, and that decreasing trend actually was noted as the verbal prompt became an aversive teaching method for Roman, therefore contributed to that decreasing line, and also further adds into the evidence that by utilizing an inappropriate prompting level can actually stray you further away from getting that skill acquisition, and just is not as effective as utilizing the correct prompting level, which in this study, the appropriate level for Roman would have been to stay at a positional prompt. And continuing further, I really learned, again, the effectiveness or the importance and crucialness of really using an effective prompt level. And I really hope this continues to open up the conversation for more studies into different types of prompt levels, different criteria that we should take into consideration when creating an intervention, and creating those teaching methods for an individual. And again, overall, the conclusion of my study does find positional prompting was most effective in the study, but this delves into the limitations of my study as well. My study does include only one participant. And by only including one participant, the generalization is very, very limited in regards to the results that I received from this study. The biggest conclusion we're able to come to is the importance of personalizing your instructional methods or instructional teaching techniques according to the needs and learning that most works well with an individual, as well as being able to show that by not taking into consideration the needs of the individual or the most effective prompting level for the individual, it can actually have negative effects, as we saw that decreasing trend line with the verbal prompt. However, overall generalization, being able to say, for example, another individual should have positional prompting if they wanted to acquire this life skill, may not be as the same results for that client, because we only had one participant for the study, which is why it's considered a limitation. As well as there is only one observer who observed and measured the entire study. Therefore, an IOA, inter-observer agreement, was not able to be implemented. Therefore, validity for this study was very limited and was not able to be utilized really in this study. And it's something that I would definitely change in the future, is increasing the participants as well as increasing the observers that are participating in the study as well. I feel this could be incredibly useful, especially in regards to getting more data. And in regards to, if I were to recreate this design too, I would absolutely increase the time that this study was implemented for, or executed over time, because it would be really great to be able to see the long-term effects that this study could have, and also take into consideration other methods such as fading out the prompting, or even, for example, applying this specific method, or applying better criteria, or the positional prompting, since we see it so effective here. Would that be able to apply if we were to take into consideration dishes, mopping, wiping, or other skill acquisitions that maybe the Roman may need to have in the future as well? Does that mean positional prompting is going to be most effective, continuing further for other interventions or other things that he would like to improve on or acquire as a skill in the future? Those are things I would take into real consideration in the future, that is adding more time into the study. And yes, so overall, I really enjoyed overall doing this study, and really getting the chance to implement it, see it myself, and hopefully in the future, I will be able to continue to add on to the study myself. Again, overall conclusion of this is, it is so incredibly important to utilize an appropriate prompting level, prompting method for a client when creating skill acquisition goals, or definitely skill acquisition goals, or maybe even when we're trying to decrease an intervention. Overall, that is the conclusion of my study. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen and hear me out. Thank you very much again.